I lost my leg in Iraq, but my brother-in-law was the real enemy. I don't tell this story often. Honestly, even now, it still makes my hands shake, and not from the PTSD, but from a different kind of tremor, the memory of a cold, calculated rage. When I came back from my second tour in Iraq with one less leg than I left with, the doctors at Walter Reed told me I was lucky. Lucky to be alive. The first person to visit me in the hospital after my wife was my brother-in-law, Richard. I'll never forget the look on his face, a mixture of pity and something else, something smug, as he looked down at the neatly bandaged stump where my left leg used to be. "Well," he said, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard, "at least you got a free retirement out of it." I just stared at that empty space under the sheet and wondered if this was what my life meant now. A punchline, a transaction. 5 years later, and I still woke up at 3 a.m. sometimes, my hand instinctively reaching for the rifle that wasn't there. I still hit the deck when a car backfires, my heart trying to pound its way out of my chest. But you know what hurts worse than losing a limb? It's the phantom pain of watching your own family look at you like you're broken merchandise, a piece of damaged goods they have to store in the attic. Richard owned a chain of 3 successful, upscale restaurants in the city, and he never, ever missed an opportunity to remind everyone of it. Every Christmas, every birthday, every damn family barbecue, he'd roll up in whatever new Mercedes he'd bought that month, talking loudly about profit margins and expansion plans, while I was still learning how to navigate a flight of stairs without falling on my face. He'd offer me a job, always in front of everyone, something demeaning like a dishwasher or a busboy, saying it would be good for me to get out of the house. He wasn't offering a hand. He was polishing his own halo. My therapist at the VA, a well-meaning woman who'd never been closer to a war than a movie theater, kept telling me I needed to find a new purpose. Purpose. As if I hadn't had purpose before. As if leading a squad of 18-year-old kids through the hellfire of Fallujah wasn't purpose enough. But she was right about one thing. The silence was deafening. I needed something to fight for again, something to build instead of just try not to break. So I started cooking. It sounds stupid, I know. A big, tough, one-legged soldier playing chef in his tiny apartment kitchen. But when you've eaten nothing but meals ready to eat for the better part of 2 years, you learn to worship flavor. You dream of fresh garlic and real butter. Cooking became my therapy. The focus it required, the precision, it was like cleaning my rifle or planning a patrol. It was a mission. I saved every single penny of my disability checks. I watched every cooking show, read every cookbook the library had, and spent hours on YouTube learning knife skills. And eventually, I bought a beat-up, ancient food truck that looked like it had survived its own war. My buddy Carlos came to help me fix it up. He'd lost his left arm in Kandahar, but could still diagnose and fix an engine with his one good hand better than anyone I knew. When Richard saw the truck for the first time, parked in my driveway, leaking 3 different kinds of fluid, he actually laughed out loud. A deep, booming laugh that made my teeth ache. "That piece of junk is going to ruin you," he said, shaking his head. "Stick to what you know. Like sitting. But here's the thing about veterans. We're used to being underestimated. We thrive on it." Within 6 months of launching the Squared Away Grill, I had 8 guys working shifts, all of them vets. My best guys were Tommy, who suffered from seizures after TBI in Ramadi, but made the most incredible carnitas tacos you've ever tasted, and Mike, whose hand shook from nerve damage but could flip eggs with a grace that was like watching poetry in motion. We weren't just serving food. We were serving a second chance. We were building a place where guys like us could have a reason to get up in the morning, a place where nobody thanked us for our service with that sad, pitying look in their eyes. It was a new kind of squad, and that truck was our forward operating base. For some reason, Richard hated it. He couldn't stand it. Our success was a personal insult to him. At my niece's high school graduation party, he cornered me by the keg and said something I will never forget. "Giving handouts to a bunch of broken soldiers won't fix them, you know. Maybe if they were stronger, they wouldn't need charity from a glorified hot dog stand." I saw red. For a split second, I wanted to put him through the drywall. But I just walked away. Because in that moment, I knew what I needed to do. The city held an annual food festival and competition, a big deal with local TV coverage. And guess whose flagship restaurant was the main sponsor and host? I entered our truck that night. My crew thought I'd finally lost my mind. Us, competing against real chefs in brick-and-mortar restaurants? But they didn't get it. This wasn't about winning. This was about proving we weren't broken. It was about pride. We practiced for weeks. We spent every spare dollar on the best ingredients. Tommy's mother, before she died, had sent him a binder full of handwritten family recipes from her village in Mexico, and we perfected every single one. Mike's Korean grandmother had taught him how to make dumplings, and even with his shaking hands, each one was a perfect, delicate parcel of flavor. When our truck, freshly painted and gleaming, rolled into the festival grounds on the day of the competition, the look on Richard's face was beautiful. It was a masterpiece of stunned disbelief and barely concealed rage. The crowd came in waves. First the curious, then the intrigued, then a line that snaked halfway across the park. By mid-afternoon, we'd served over 300 plates of Tommy's tacos and Mike's dumplings. When it came time to announce the People's Choice winner, Richard was already on stage, a smug smile plastered on his face, clearly expecting his own restaurant's name to be called. Then they said it. The squared-away grill. His face went through a spectacular series of colors, from red to purple to a pasty, sickly white. The prize was $5,000 and a ridiculous, oversized golden spatula trophy. Richard, as the host, had to hand it to me on stage. I swear his hands shook worse than Mike's as he passed it over. I took the microphone, looked him right in the eye, and smiled. I want to thank my brother-in-law, Richard Castellano, for inspiring us to work harder, I said into the mic, my voice ringing out across the park. When people tell you you're broken, you have two choices. You can believe them, or you can prove them wrong. He had to smile for the cameras. He had to shake my hand. But as he did, he leaned in close, his voice a low, venomous whisper. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. The next week was beautiful. We had lines around the block every day. For the first time since coming home, I felt like something good was actually happening, like we were building something that would last. Then the inspection started. We were hit 3 times in 5 days by the city health department. Our permits got lost at the city office twice. We started getting anonymous noise complaints from businesses blocks away. But we kept going because that's what we do. We adapt and overcome. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got a text from Carlos. Cops are here. They're impounding the truck. Tommy's seizing. Everything we had built was burning down around us. I sat there in my apartment, staring at the wall, and for a moment, I let the thought in. Maybe he was right. Maybe we were too broken to build anything good. Then I remembered our oath. We don't leave anyone behind. I drove to the truck's location expecting a disaster, but I found something worse. Richard was there, calmly signing some paperwork with the tow truck driver. He saw me and walked over, that same smug look on his face. Tough break, he said, not even trying to sound sincere. Seems the city considers this thing a public health hazard. Don't worry, I handled everything. They're planning to crush it at the impound lot later today. He was enjoying this. You're insane, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. He just smiled. No, I'm just better than you. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Evidence. Always get evidence. Richard's smirk widened as he watched me fumble with the phone, my prosthetic leg struggling for purchase on the uneven pavement. Behind him, 2 police officers stood by impassively as the tow truck operator hooked heavy chains to my truck's axle. Tommy was sitting on the curb, his whole body still trembling from the post-seizure tremors, while Mike held a wadded-up paper towel to his nose where he'd hit the ground trying to catch Tommy. You really thought you could compete with me? Richard stepped closer, his expensive cologne making my stomach turn. A bunch of broken soldiers playing restaurant? This was always going to end one way. The tow truck's engine roared to life, and our truck, our home, our hope, was lifted off the ground like it weighed nothing. Carlos stood by, his one good arm clenched into a fist at his side. I could see the gears turning in his head, calculating if he could disable the tow truck before they hauled our lives away. Don't, I called out to him. Not worth it. Richard checked his watch, a gold Rolex that probably cost more than my entire business. Smart man. At least you know when you're beaten. That's when I saw him. Marcus, the kid I'd fired 3 months ago for showing up to the lunch rush drunk and belligerent. He was sitting in the passenger seat of Richard's Mercedes, counting a thick stack of $100 bills. Our eyes met through the windshield, and he quickly looked away, shoving the money deep into his jacket pocket. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. The sudden, anonymous health complaints. The tips to the inspector about non-existent code violations. Marcus knew our operation inside and out. He knew our cleaning schedules, our supply storage, every single permit we'd filed. How much did you pay him? I asked Richard, my voice flat. He feigned ignorance. Pay who? But his smile gave it all away. He wanted me to know. He wanted me to understand just how thoroughly he had destroyed me. The truck disappeared around the corner. 5 years of my savings, 6 months of 18-hour days, countless hours of hope and hard work, all gone. Here's what's going to happen now, Richard said, pulling out his own phone. The health department will find a number of serious violations. Your business permits will be permanently revoked. The fines alone will bankrupt you. Unless, he let the word hang in the air. I knew this game. In Iraq, we called it winning hearts and minds. Make them desperate. Make them need you, then make them beg. Unless what? I asked. You publicly apologize, he said, his eyes gleaming. You hold a press conference. You admit your food was substandard, that you put people at risk. And then, I'll make all these little problems of yours disappear. Behind him, Tommy vomited onto the sidewalk. The seizures always left him disoriented and sick. Mike was trying to clean him up with napkins from his pocket, his hands shaking so badly he kept dropping them. These men had followed me through hell. Now I'd led them right back into it. I need time to think, I said. You have 24 hours, he replied. After that, The health department files criminal charges. He walked to his Mercedes, where Marcus was slouched so low in the passenger seat, he was practically on the floor. As they drove away, I saw our golden spatula, our trophy, sitting in the back window. The bastard had taken that, too. The next 3 weeks were the longest of my life. The health department launched a full, aggressive investigation. Every day brought a new, fabricated accusation. Improper food temperature controls, contaminated prep surfaces, expired licenses. All of it was lies, but proving it took lawyers, and lawyers took money I no longer have. My savings evaporated with terrifying speed. Lawyer fees, storage costs for our impounded equipment, and the mounting medical bills for Tommy's now daily seizures. I sold my good prosthetic, the advanced one that didn't feel like a lead pipe after 8 hours of standing. I sold my van. I sold everything except my pride. And Richard knew that was next on his list. Carlos crashed on my couch the first week. By the second, he'd been evicted from his apartment, unable to make rent without the food truck income. He never complained. He just showed up every morning to help me sift through the mountain of paperwork, his one good hand methodically organizing files, looking for a loophole, a mistake, anything we could use to fight back. Mike's grandmother took him in, but I could see the shame eating at him every time I saw him. He'd been so proud to be sending her money every week from his earnings. Now he was back to being her burden. His hands shook worse every day. Tommy's mom would have been devastated. He'd been doing so well before all this, down to maybe 1 seizure a month. Now it was 3 or 4 times a week. The stress was literally killing him, and the VA doctors just kept upping his meds and sending him home with a pamphlet on stress management. I spent my days at the public library, researching obscure health codes and filing appeals, and my nights staring at the ceiling, reading the same text from Richard over and over. Time's running out. Just say the word and this all goes away. 3 weeks in, I found it. Buried deep in a supplementary report from the health department was a scanned copy of a receipt. Marcus had provided it as evidence of us purchasing expired meat. Except the receipt was dated 2 weeks after I'd fired him. He couldn't have known about that order because he wasn't working for us anymore. It was a clear, undeniable fabrication. I called my lawyer, my heart pounding with excitement for the first time in weeks. She listened patiently, then sighed. "It's good," she said, "but it's not enough. It's circumstantial. We need to prove Richard paid him. Prove the entire investigation was a setup. That takes depositions, subpoenas, court time. Months at a minimum. Can you afford to fight this for that long?" I looked at Carlos sleeping on my couch, his face etched with worry even in his sleep. I thought of the growing pile of Tommy's medical bills on my kitchen counter and the foreclosure notice I'd been hiding under my keyboard. No, I couldn't afford it. That night, I was sitting in the dark, holding the golden spatula I'd snuck into Richard's restaurant to steal back. It was a stupid, reckless thing to do, but I needed something to hold on to, a tangible reminder of what we had built. Carlos found me there. "You're going to take his deal," he said. It wasn't a question. "I can't let you guys end up homeless because of my pride," I said, my voice thick. "It's not about pride," he said, sitting down beside me. His phantom arm probably ached just like my phantom leg did. "It's about letting them win. Again. They already won, Carlos." He shook his head. "No, they won when they sent us to war. They won when they brought us back broken. They won when they thanked us for our service and then forgot we existed. This is just Richard being an ass." I thought about that all night. The next morning, Richard called. "Time's up. What's it going to be?" I could hear the smug satisfaction in his voice. He had me. He'd orchestrated this perfectly, making me watch my brothers suffer, turning my own leadership instincts, my need to protect my men, into a weapon against me. "I need to see the paperwork first," I said. "Proof that you'll actually drop everything." "Smart. My office." 1 hour. I hung up and looked at Carlos, Tommy, and Mike. They'd all shown up at my apartment, as if they knew today was the day of surrender. Tommy's face was still bruised from his last fall. Mike's hands trembled as he tried to drink his coffee. "Whatever you decide," Tommy said, his words slightly slurred from the medication, "we're with you." Richard's office smelled of leather and arrogance. The papers were all laid out, a confession drafted by his lawyers. All I had to do was sign. "My men," I said, "they won't face any consequences." He waved a dismissive hand. "They're not important enough to prosecute." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. Muscle memory from signing too many casualty reports, I guess. Richard leaned back in his high-backed leather chair, savoring his victory. "You know the funny thing is," he said, "you actually made decent food. But decent doesn't matter when you're playing in my world." I thought about Marcus somewhere counting Richard's money, about the inspector who'd been bought, about a system that let men like Richard destroy lives for sport. I signed my name. I'd chosen to save my brothers over my pride. But he'd forgotten something important about soldiers. We adapt. We overcome. We find another way to fight. "Pleasure doing business with you," Richard said, already reaching for his phone to schedule the press conference where I would publicly humiliate myself. I stood to leave, my prosthetic clicking sharply against his marble floor. At the door, I turned back. You know what we used to say in Iraq? I asked. The enemy always gets a vote. You've cast your vote. Now it's my turn. His smile faltered just for a second. Good. Let him wonder. This wasn't over. I'd signed his paper. I'd take his deal. I'd even say his scripted words. But Richard had made one crucial mistake. He'd left my men with nothing left to lose. And there is nothing more dangerous in this world than soldiers who have already survived the worst thing imaginable. I walked out into the sunlight where my brothers were waiting. They didn't have to ask what I'd done. They could see on my face. The same look I'd had before every mission. We weren't done fighting. We were just changing tactics. The press conference was just as bad as I'd imagined. Richard had set it up in front of his flagship restaurant, a backdrop of his own success for my public failure. I stood at the podium and read the words he'd prepared. Our food safety standards were inadequate. I take full responsibility for putting the community at risk. Each word tasted like ash. I could see my guys in the crowd, Carlos standing ramrod straight, Mike with his shaking hand shoved deep in his pockets, Tommy looking pale and unsteady. Richard was beaming. But then something happened he hadn't planned on. A woman in the back of the crowd, Maria Gonzalez, whose son David was a vet and a regular at our truck, started asking questions. Mr. Castellano, since you're so concerned about these veterans, will you be hiring them at your restaurants? Richard was caught off guard. He mumbled something about considering qualified applicants. Then Maria pressed him about accommodating employees with disabilities, like Tommy's seizures. The crowd started murmuring. Other people started asking similar questions. His perfect PR moment was turning into a disaster. He cut the conference short, hissing at me as he walked past. You set this up? I hadn't, but I was grateful she had. The video of Richard dodging her questions went viral. The comments were brutal. The public narrative started to shift. But it didn't change our reality. We were still broke, still jobless, still facing a mountain of debt. And Richard wasn't done. A few days later, I got a call from the health department. New, anonymous complaints of food poisoning from weeks before we were shut down. Without our records, which were in the crushed truck, we couldn't dispute it. They were threatening civil penalties, even criminal charges. That night, Carlos showed up at my door with a split lip. He'd taken a dive in a back alley fight for $50. I need to eat, was all he said. That was our rock bottom. Warriors, reduced to taking punches for pocket change. Then we caught a break. Carlos saw Marcus at a bar, drunk and flashing cash, bragging to anyone who would listen that Richard had paid him $5,000 to lie about rats in our truck and promised him another $5 to testify about the food poisoning. The first real crack in Richard's armor. The problem was, we were too broke to even afford a beer to get into the bar to record him. But then Mike's grandmother had an idea. She knew the bar's owner, Mr. Park, through the local Korean community. Maybe he could help. Turns out, the bar's security cameras recorded audio, and Marcus was a very loud drunk. Mr. Park, whose own nephew had just come home from Afghanistan, gave us the footage. It was grainy, but Marcus's slurred confession was there. It still wasn't enough. Richard's lawyers would tear a drunk witness apart. We needed more. I started digging. I went to Richard's suppliers, not looking for a job, but for information. A loading dock manager, a Vietnam vet, told me Richard was 60 days behind on his payments, nearly $100,000 in the red. He wasn't a king in his castle. He was a fraud living on leverage. His perfect image was a house of cards, and we had almost knocked it over. That's why he'd been so vicious. It wasn't about pride, it was about survival. Richard, feeling the pressure from the bad press and his mounting debts, made his next mistake. He pushed the DA to fast-track the criminal charges against me. He needed me silenced, and quickly, but his desperation made him sloppy. The morning the trial date was set, Marcus ended up in the hospital with alcohol poisoning. He'd been celebrating his upcoming payday from Richard. Scared and sick, he confessed everything to me on video from his hospital bed. Every detail of how Richard had coached him, paid him, and promised him more. We had it all. My lawyer took the confession, the bar footage, security photos of Richard meeting Marcus, and Marcus's bank records showing the cash deposits, straight to the district attorney. The next day, Richard was arrested for witness tampering, bribery, and fraud. His empire crumbled overnight. Suppliers called in their debts. His restaurants closed. The city dropped all charges against me. We had won, technically, but my men were still in ruins. Tommy was back in hospital. Carlos was sleeping in the back of an auto shop where he'd found work. Mike's hands were worse than ever. Then, a woman named Margaret knocked on my door. She was a venture capitalist, an Air Force vet. She followed our story in the news. I want to invest, she said. Not charity, business. A chain of food trucks, all veteran-operated, with proper benefits, health insurance, and mental health support. She saw what we were trying to build. She believed in the mission. The next 2 years were a blur of hard work. We launched a new company, the Vanguard Group. We started with 3 trucks and expanded to 10. We opened a commissary kitchen that also served as a training center for other vets wanting to get into the culinary world. We offered real, living wages, full benefits, and on-site counseling. Tommy, his seizures now well managed with proper health care, became our head of training. Mike ran our entire social media and marketing department, his once shaking hands now confidently typing out our story to the world. Carlos was my COO, my right hand, his one good arm more effective than any two of mine. Richard got 18 months in a minimum security prison. When he got out, he had nothing. His wife had left him, his reputation was destroyed, his money was gone. Which brings me to this morning. I was in my office, looking over the specs for our first brick-and-mortar restaurant, when my assistant buzzed. "There's a Richard Castellano here for the dishwasher position." I told her to send him in. He walked in, a ghost of the man he once was. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by worn, ill-fitting clothes. The Rolex was gone. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, desperate look in his eyes. He didn't recognize me at first. He just saw a man behind a big desk. He handed me his resume. "I'm a hard worker," he said, his voice quiet, "willing to do whatever it takes." I looked at his resume, then up at him. Our eyes met, and I saw the recognition dawn on his face, followed by a wave of shame and fear. He started to stammer an apology, to turn and leave, but I held up a hand. We just sat there in silence for a long, long moment. The man who had tried to destroy me, who had called my brothers broken soldiers, was asking me for a job, for a handout. He had tried to destroy my second chance, and now his own was sitting in my hands. The old me, the soldier, wanted to savor this, wanted to make him beg. But looking at him, I didn't feel rage. I just felt tired. The war was over. I had already won. And winning, I'd learned, wasn't about destroying your enemy. It was about building something better in the ruins they left behind.